the post-conflict restoration of Syria.
Related to the negotiations between Iran and US. US officials have been talking about a possible strike on Iran if Tehran does not accept the deal that Washington wants. Does Russia believe there could be a strike, or does it view the mention of a possible strike as a threat to pressure Iran into agreeing to their terms and conditions?
Вы знаете, я
I don't see any sense to speak about this, to speak about our beliefs and our hopes. I would like to say what is clear, that blackmailing is not conducive to negotiations, and Russia is persuaded that in order to find a mutually beneficial solution on the Iranian issue requires equal, respectful dialogue, and there is no reasonable alternative to this dialogue. We are ready to promote the consistent settlement and implementation of the agreements, and we hope that the reasoned sense, the common sense, shall prevail, and Iran won't be engaged into a new military venture with far-reaching consequences.
Спасибо вам. С нами ли...
Is author E with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Ruslan Pankratov. I have two questions today. What is the assessment of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as to the statement of the Munich participants that Russia remains the principal threat of the Euro-Atlantic security? And I just got an idea that the traditional New Year of China is the principal celebration, and I thought that the Chinese journalist can... And once I just remembered that there are holidays in China, and we congratulate our colleagues from China and our friends from China, and we congratulate all those who celebrate the New Year festivities, the Chinese New Year festivities. I'm sorry. Yes, that was worth. It was just a kind of a secondary reflections. The most wanted tickets inside China and the most tourist attraction in China is happening in the context of the New Year, because everyone has to go home and celebrate the festivities in the family. This is a strong tradition, and everyone, as we see, goes home to visit their families and having a rest. I am so sorry for this. Yes, let us return to our briefing. I had two questions. What is the assessment of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as to the statements of the Munich participants that Russia remains the principal threat to the Euro-Atlantic security, end of quote? And is there any attempt to deliberately ignore any talks? Previously, we've mentioned that they are scared of such, and they are being obsessed by some kind of phobia. And we've also added that that's the problem of their own. But here, I think that we should add that this phobia makes them earn money. They build such financial schemes based on these ideologies. As for the Munich conference, we've talked a lot about this today. It has stopped being a platform for international debates to prevent conflicts. This is not a panel discussion at the regional or global level. This is all this frenzy accusations, flagrant narrative, irresponsible statements. This is detachment from reality and marginalization. In the mid of this well-known and popular platform, it even cannot be called a Middle East market, which means happiness for all. And here we see just a kind of some criminal group, because there are. Why just a part of the group? Because there are some countries who have grains of reason and try to explain what's going on, what's playing out in the world. But unfortunately, this assertive world minority is seeking for one thing: to form the illusion of the transatlantic unity and wide support of the West. Right now, this ideology has collapsed as well, and there are internal quarrels, because they cannot hide away their internal quarrels. Over the weekend, in the past weekend, they remembered the renaissance of the partnership with the United States, and while Americans called and claimed that they should develop their own expertise. I think it's a kind of a psychological competition and theater. When everyone was competing in Russophobia narratives, instead of finding a way out of this situation, the statements of top officials of Europe reaffirmed once again an assertive anti-Russia policy based on the Nazi ideology. Just listen their statements, read them. Apart from a strategic defeat and damage they are seeking to inflict to Russia, no fresh idea, no reasonable idea was voiced as for the outlines of the security on the European part of the continent, or on the European continent as a whole, or on the European continent, which includes Russia. Such a mixture of voices and sounds. And I think even 5 or 7 years ago, it was much better. Of course, we've highlighted that the Munich conference was deteriorating, and we were right by saying so. Previously, they had some reasons. And I remember how Mr. Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine, went to Munich to sell passports. And right now, they're just mocking at the Navalny topic and case. They're mocking at their agents and at everything. It has nothing to do about true reasons. It's just mockery of the people over the people who believe them. And it's a kind of a show and a competition on the worst name of the opponent. I've heard that Mr. Rutte, and I've seen how he called Russia, such as the escargot or naming some, providing some other titles for Russia. Of course, we could have done the same, but I think we should leave them alone there on this bottom. Yes, this was a kind of manifestation of transatlantic gathering of the stupidity, and I'm talking about Madame Callas. So instead of admitting the truth that their architecture had failed, and trying to find the next step and the ideology that would underpin this path, they just remembered their old assumptions, juggling them all around, resorting to all anti-Russia rhetoric. Do you have any other questions? Yes, as for the topic of psychiatrists, I just got an idea why these events do not receive any comments by the health ministry of Russia. Please join our briefing. We need your expert opinion, because I don't have such terms. Because when people act like children and call this as a conference and name as a conference, a security conference, and I think that psychiatrists should join our briefing for giving an adequate assessment. What is the ministry's attitude towards the blocking of the media outlets in the Baltic states under pretext of fighting the spread of misinformation? I believe that on the one hand that this is a manifestation of double standards and disrespect for the principles of democracy. And the second point, it can be viewed as a dysfunction of many international organizations and NGOs that protect journalists and the freedom of speech. We see that there is no response to killings of journalists, to the discrimination of speech, to the banning of channels. But this persecution on the basis of the language, this is all about human rights and humanitarian area. The West does not make any comments on this point. We are living in a world which bets on the practical side and on practical efforts, so we cannot hope for such statements, but they made it otherwise. I'm against the term of double standards because it was back then, it was relevant. Right now, it's about complicity in the persecution against the Russian journalists, because in this case, amid this deafness, this means that they are involved in these criminal activities. And I think I refer to the OC institutions. We've released a lot of reports and evidences. And right now, my colleagues draft a huge document on our journalists killed or fallen victims in Kiev on how many people are on the so-called lists of those to be eliminated. And we will once again draft such lists, but unfortunately I understand their, and I can predict their response. Thank you very much. And I congratulate you with the Chinese New Year. And I wish you the same. And I wish my congratulations with the upcoming 23rd of February. Is Ambassador's Life with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Yes, good afternoon. Посольская жизнь. I have 3 questions today. The mass media journalists believe that Russia is among the principal states that would outline the global policy for the near future along with the United States, China and other major actors. What strategic alliances and areas of international cooperation Russia sees as priorities to strengthen its influence in the changing global order? We don't care about policymakers. There is the term as common sense. Russia, which has its cultural identity, which occupies the large part of the continent, which has access to many seas, and has widespread logistic chains, and unites continents, even several continents, which has scientific, technical, humanitarian achievements, is future-oriented while respecting the history and culture. How can this country ignore the interests of the major states? We are not like the members of the Munich conference. We respect the rights of others. And it is our reality. Tchaikovsky has been cancelled for 4 years, and then the foreign minister of Switzerland comes to Moscow as the OSCE chairman and offers the foreign music box with the Tchaikovsky music, saying that Russia is the part of Europe. And I wonder, why did you try to abolish and cancel Tchaikovsky? And I think this is a worldwide and famous musician and composer. Only a small group of some strange people who believed that because of their angry attitude and hatred towards the world, that they can damage Tchaikovsky if they cancel and throw away the ads about the concerts. So I think we need to deny and decline any references to such journalists. As for the unity, we prioritize the work with the CIS countries, work together with the CSTO, CIS, Russia Central Asia formats, and I've already mentioned this today. The CIS, of course. For a more broader issue, this is the SCO, the Russia-China connection tie, which become one of the stabilizing factors of the international affairs. We have forged multifaceted ties with India over the past years. We have established an overwhelming strategic partnership with North Korea and Iran. As for the Middle and East Asian states, we deepen our contacts between Russia and the Persian Gulf. We prepare the first Russia-Arab summit. We launched regular meetings at the level of foreign ministers in the format Russia-Africa. We increased development with the African Union and cooperation with it. We plan to institutionalize the relations with Africa, with ECOWAS. We strengthen our ties with the key partners from Latin America and of the Caribbean basin. Russia is an observer state in a number of regional organizations of the Latin Association and of the Caribbean states and the American integration system. We elaborate the possibilities to restore dialogue with the Latin America and the Caribbean states. We strengthen contacts with the Caribbean and Ant community. We prioritize interaction with the Global South in the framework of ASEAN-centric mechanisms of new types such as BRICS and SCO.
It's very important for us to put efforts into financial economic mechanism, their protection, production and logistics chains, transport corridors. We support efforts to counter unilateral sanctions undertaken within the group of friends in defense of the UN Charter, BRICS, the SCO and other fora. Anti-colonial areas are also of priority, and taking into account Eurasia, its strategic objective is to implement Russian initiatives to establish the greater Eurasian partnership. So my second question, in Azerbaijani side, Azerbaijani prisons, there are 11 Russian citizens. What efforts does Russia take to free them? And what steps does the foreign ministry plan to return them to their motherland? So if you want, I will precise about the exact number of people who are in prisons there in Azerbaijan. But I think you mean particular people, not everyone. We regularly, by our embassy in Baku, by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we comment on this issue. We are in close contact with themselves directly and with their relatives. Another consular access to the Baku pre-trial detention facility was granted on the 30th of December 2025, as we have repeatedly noted. The speedy release of those Russian citizens and their return home is our absolute priority. We regularly raise this issue in bilateral contacts, and such liberation by Baku would be an important step in strengthening good neighborly relations between our country. So I would like to highlight this one of our priorities of our ministry. So my third question, does the Russian Foreign Ministry consider the delivery of a note of protest in connection with the statements by Parliament member Konstantin Zatulin justified? And what steps is Moscow prepared to take to somehow ease the situation and restore constructive dialogue with Azerbaijan? So yes, it was about negotiations, about phone calls. Our ministry and other agencies, officials, it was not just solemn events, but negotiations process. We have reported on each of those, and the relevant ministries have also reported about the first part of your question. I will clarify and we will report. Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Dost channel with us? Yes, hello. I would like to continue the issue of the poisoning of Alexei Navalny. Marco Rubio said that Washington has no basis to distrust the conclusions of the European regarding the poisoning of Alexei Navalny. He was poisoned with dart frog poison, phytidine. You know about that, statements by 5 European countries. So does the statement by American Secretary of State change violation here? I would like to begin with the first part of the question, where there has been some violation. Here, And maybe you have some materials that have testified about analysis result, maybe some laboratory data on official documents with stamps, with signatures, how you have repeatedly addressed, how you have contacted doctors, did some blood tests and so on. There are also verified papers. No, I don't have that. I do not represent the Russian state. As far as I remember, Russia is the OPCW member, and on the OPCW website there are materials about the poisoning of Alexei Navalny, and Russia could request those materials. Yes, we have requested, but maybe you have not listened to our briefing from the beginning. I have enumerated how many requests we have sent. It was tens of requests with one question, just one question. So it was OPCW special conclusions. But you have asked about some fake materials, some violations. But you can talk about it only when you say that you have been provided a document. For example, you are given a passport, you go to some official agency, and they say your passport is fake. How can we say about fake documents if we have no documents at all here? When there were political statements by the current 5 states, before that a number of states, and OPCW Technical Secretariat, they were purely political. We tell every time what you ask about, but just tell, let us clarify. Let me just finish my statement, please. I will be in dialogue with you until you tell me that's it. I promise you that. But for me to be able to answer you, please do not interrupt me. So we have not received, and I tell that every month, so we have not received any documents at all about some formula of the substance and the methodology applied in the identification of the relevant, as they state, poison, substance, and so on. There's nothing of the kind. Nothing. And the second question, maybe let us see. If we had remained inactive, had not done anything, your indignation would have been justified, and I would have supported that, but you have sent tens of official documents, not diplomatic. The diplomatic documents were accompanying. Those were official requests by law enforcement or officials. That happens. Every year some events happen, unfortunately. Some of them are qualified as crimes, attempts to commit crimes, and if those events are of transborder nature, committed in one country in relation to citizens of other country, law enforcement authorities exchange this information. It's on a yearly basis, annually done. Why this? In this case, our country has not been provided anything. It's because they provide those fake substances, fake data. Because as soon as they provide the documents, there will be substantive work carried out. They do not want that. We will need just to provide, to investigate. We will need to provide clarifications. And like Theresa May, she went to the parliament. She said it was done by Russia, as it has done that before, and Russia can do that now. That was it. Even in Scotland, yeah, there was just one press conference regarding Skripal. The same thing is about Navalny. According to their point of view, when was that done? What laboratories made such conclusions? How has this been identified? That needs to be done for a start. So now your precise questions, additional questions. Yes, if you have asked, I have listened to the end. So what about the investigation by Alexei Navalny himself after poisoning and his rehabilitation with the exact names of officials who have poisoned him? And moreover, he has reached his poisoner by phone that was published and that was explained in detail by Navalny team. So after he said that his mother is a consul, it just became clear for me. My mother is an arts critic, so that's my relationship to that. It's not just some offenses by him. So my mother is a scholar. She studies art. So she has never been some consul, but he has presented my mother as a consul. So regarding Marco Rubio, does that change anything in our relationship, in our attitude? No. So all those accusations against Russia are in that highly likely manner. It's ordinary manner. There are no specific data. There is no specific data there. It's some proclamation based on some unclear things. It's just in order to make loud statements at the Munich conference. And somehow to switch the agenda from Epstein files, and mostly it was for the Munich conference. So just let me one more additional question. Yes, I will reply to that. We do not hope, we do not ask, we just demand, we request to provide specific data on this issue. It was supported by the notes of our embassy in Germany and in particular in London on the Skripal case to their law enforcement officers, any law enforcement bodies that are ready to provide the facts and the opinion of the third countries regarding the fake accusations of our country cannot influence our position on this issue. They are obliged to provide the data. Frogs, something like that. It's about ducks, and who was there at the initial stage? Cats. It's similar to that. So you can ask a question. Yes, my last question to clarify. You have just gone deep into the French story. So it was the funeral of Navalny. His fortune, it's of concern to millions of people in Russia and all over the world. So what happened to Alexei Navalny? So what happened to him in 2020? In Omsk, he was in hospital. And what happened 2 years ago? Thank you very much. If you now personally or from your media outlet have said that that I have no other citizenship because your colleagues, they have tried to provide some fake statements about me and my family. I have never heard that. So what happened to him? It's a question for law enforcement authorities. Those who just transported him, who accompanied his life, and what happened there? What has happened? It's a question to them. But actually, he became ill on the territory of Russia. And on the territory of Germany, was everything okay with him? What did they do with him there? No one knows them. Actually, he became ill when he was in Siberia. We have the same questions to that side. regarding the Russian part of criminal cases, it's the scope, the responsibility of law enforcement authorities. I can address them and provide you the part of information they have on your question, and I will do that. But questions to those who just directly were his political curators or friend, you name it, or his colleagues from that side, you have some proof that Alexei Navalny has some curators on the West? I have never seen that. And the person, as they said, was poisoned in Berlin, as they said in Berlin, poisoned by chemical weapons. The German Chancellor could visit him in his hospital chamber. Yes, for any person who would have found himself in such a situation, he would have been visited. But for the German Chancellor to visit a person in the hospital chamber after poisoning by chemical weapons, it would have been ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But to invent stories that he had not been curated, not supported by some European political figures, because that support was done. It was done in all the areas. And where are the documents that testify about that support? Documents, yes, documents, the proof. I beg your pardon. So you require documents, formulas, proof? So have you never heard statements by presidents, NATO countries, foreign ministers, supporting the actions by Navalny? Have you never seen that? Maybe you do not follow this issue? Because the situation with the Ukrainian crisis, journalists are killed. Unfortunately, sadly, regularly. So please let me make the statement. So I have never heard anyone from NATO countries, prime ministers or presidents expressing condolences, although those people for many years have devoted themselves to journalist activities. It's a big story, like there is the Alley of Angels, because children were killed, and British, French officials, ministers have not visited them, not once. I know how many our compatriots get into trouble in their countries. I have never seen any similar support provided to them. What are you talking about? So when Moscow makes statements, some statements expressing sympathy to Viktor Orban, does it mean that Moscow sponsors Viktor Orban? And Viktor Orban is the Kremlin agent in Europe. Moscow only makes statement with regard to Viktor Orban only when he is accused of and now offended with regard to his relationship to the Russian Federation, taking into account his status and his post. When it's about NATO internal disputes, who should allocate which sum to someone? It's their problems. We do not interfere in that. But with regard to Viktor Orban, his relations is as the head of the country. He is offended. And I would remind you those statements by Zelensky, they concern our history. Maybe you have not seen that quotation, but he has built a bridge to our relations with Hungary. And then we comment that. But I have never thought about common statements with someone or from some communities with regard to Viktor Orban. So Viktor Orban, he has not been poisoned, and he is the prime minister. So what's the interrelation here? Because you mentioned with indignation that Angela Merkel, former German chancellor, visited Alexei Navalny. Yes, actually I have cited it as an example. Yes, I have heard your position. And Orban has been, he's not harmed here in the West, but Fico, he has been harmed. I do not understand your logics.
That I would like to say that the visit of Mr. Navalny by Angela Merkel, it doesn't make any proofs or evidence. Just by the way, just in terms of your interest on this topic, please just read on how people are being treated in terms of in health institutions, people who were poisoned. Just learn what protective measures are being used for the medical personnel when they deal and treat the patient poisoned with chemical weapons. Of course, I will learn about this, and maybe you will learn more about the poisoning of Mr. Navalny in 2020. And I invite you to join our briefings next time. Is Rosmedia with us? Yes, I am correct. I'm sorry. Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon, colleagues. Madam Zakharova. There is a perception that the current activity of the current European capitals show that they are trying and making every effort in order to stay on the international arena. So it seems that Europe is trying to preserve its place by trying to defer Russia. Is Moscow ready for talks with the European states? And don't you think that the current circumstances allows Russia to impose their opinion? And yes, thank you very much. Yes, you have a lot of questions. We always welcome you. We always welcome any questions. If you don't mind, you can put these questions, but you'd better make them as separate questions. I'm wondering, who wants to be at the table? Is it the European Union? Europe. So first and foremost, I always call that we should hesitate that from naming EU as Europe. But we should keep in mind what place do they want to occupy at the table? What table? They've disrupted all the tables. They denounced negotiations. They frauded. They did a lot of things. In order to occupy their place at the table. But first and foremost, a man should behave well and should confirm the status of a respected person, and they disrupted their international standing. And first, they should restore their international stance and standing in international relations as partners, or at least those with whom we can at least talk just briefly, not at the table of negotiations. But even in this way, And in this sense, they spread lies. So, in terms of energy, this is a sophisticated and tricky issue. The West damaged their own interests and their own economy by abandoning the energy cooperation with Russia, which had been elaborated for many decades. First with the Soviet Union, then with Russia, and they declined and undermined this negotiation table back then, even by showing their reluctance to allow access to investigations of the Nord Stream blowouts. So Russia, and I think the whole civilized world, is interested in a robust and long-standing settlement of the conflict based on the elimination of the root causes. I don't want to even speculate about the truth, but right now I see that Mr. Medinsky said, following the talks in Geneva, and this is more relevant right now, but I can say that any manipulations that we saw in summer 2025 with some truces and pauses, with NATO's aspirations to give a respite to the Kiev regime and to rearm it, all these efforts will be perceived on the basis of common sense and the situation on the ground, the situation of complete mistrust to the Western assertive world. By the way, after the Russia-America summit in Alaska in August 2025, the US president said that the best way is to conclude a direct deal, not just a ceasefire, because such agreements cannot be time-tested. But unfortunately, Kiev has not perceived this message. And I think right now we are waiting for the outcomes of the talks in Geneva. Yes, thank you very much. If we don't have any further questions, then goodbye. Thank you very much for your attention and see you soon. I wish you every best and I congratulate you with all.